In the last two units of our course, we're going to be taking a look at life in the universe. And I hope you find it really interesting and engaging, but it's kind of a weird subject. I mean, if I'm just honest, it's a weird subject to be talking about in a science class. But increasingly, the topic of discovering and understanding life elsewhere in the universe has become a part of the domain of science. And that's something we have to wrestle with in our course. So let's wrestle with it. It's fun. Let's take a look. First, I want to start by saying when we think of life in the universe, we have to think about it the right way. Our first tendency is to think like this. Think about something like Star Wars, right? And all the different kinds of crazy aliens that all basically look like humans with different kinds of heads. That's where our brain tends to go when we think about aliens, right? But we shouldn't be thinking about it that way necessarily. If you want to, you can a little bit, but life is much bigger than this, right? And we have to remember that life on Earth encapsulates lots of different kinds of living creatures. So think about these microscopic creatures that are found in pond water, right? You can see right through their bodies. They're so simple, right? These are actually sophisticated, complex life forms. Very complex life forms, right? They have eyes and they have hearts and they have circulatory systems and all this kind of stuff. Very complex life, even though they are so insanely simple compared to humans. Of course, life is even simpler than this, right? You can have single-celled life forms, these like amoebas and other sorts of things, where it's just a single cell. It doesn't have a heart or a brain or eyes or anything like that. It just kind of wanders around through the liquid that it's in. But even this constitutes life. Right? So when we're talking about life in the universe, I understand if you have kind of I don't believe in aliens, I don't really believe in aliens either. But we have to remember that we don't even know whether there are amoebas elsewhere in the universe. Or what about grass? Grass is life and it's everywhere on Earth, right? Grass is actually really sophisticated life. Do you have an issue with finding grass on another planet? What about trees on another planet? Is that even possible? Well, right now we don't know of any other place in our entire universe besides the Earth where there's even grass. So this is what makes it an interesting question. Okay, so if you find yourself why are we talking about aliens? Or if you find yourself saying why are we talking about this stuff that's so weird? Just think about grass. What about finding grass on another planet? Because even finding grass would be a revolution in our understanding about the development of life on Earth and anywhere else. Okay, so we've shared a couple things touching on this before, like this idea of life in the universe. I shared with you these Exoplanet Travel Bureau posters before, like the grass is always redder. Elsewhere on the other side, it says, right, this case of a planet around a star, where that star is more red than our own, and so maybe the grass is kind of different on that star. This idea of a habitable zone that we discussed before is really critical to understanding the possibility of life in the universe, because we want to say that what are the conditions necessary for life to exist? There must be some minimum conditions. It can't just be frozen wasteland. There has to be an atmosphere. And one of those conditions that we say must be there is that there's liquid water. We don't know that that's a requirement, but all life that we've ever seen on Earth seems to depend on the presence of liquid water. And so it's a reasonable assumption that any life elsewhere would depend on it as well. So the habitable zone, whether that be around a star or that depends on being just the right temperature. Sometimes it's called the Goldilocks zone, where it's not too hot, not too cold. It's just the right temperature. One of the things I didn't show you before, I don't believe, on this exoplanet exploration site from NASA is of all these planets that have been discovered so far, about 350 are terrestrial planets. And if you click on this, and I encourage you to explore this site, it allows you to kind of drill down through this data set in various ways. So this shows how the planets are kind of broken down. Of the 3,500 planets that have been discovered, you see what percentage are ice giants, they're called, gas giants, super Earths, or terrestrial-like planets, Earth-like planets. Here on the right, it shows potential Earths, so planets that, and when we're saying that, we're really talking about Earth's planets that are the same size and located within a habitable zone, so there's liquid water. So here we have, for example, this one, GJ667c C. What a terrible name. That's like 1.5 times the size of the Earth. Here at Kepler 186f, just 10% larger than the Earth's radius. So you see on this, they're showing the Earth there and all of these other circles for comparison, some of which are even a little smaller. Okay, it shows the latest discoveries, but it also shows the method of discovery that's been used. But we already talked about searching for planets. I just want to put another plug out for exploring this website, especially as we think about life elsewhere in the universe. This is a really scientific way of pursuing that question. Like, let's start by finding the other planets. And once we find the planets, we can focus on studying those planets to figure out, do they have atmospheres? Do they have the conditions we think might be necessary for life? But in these 2 units, we're going to let our imaginations go a little bit bigger than that, all right? And one of the things I want to show you is a project I worked on with the University of Notre Dame, which is called the Living World Space Art Contest. And this is where we asked students to imagine, okay, here's a planet, an extrasolar planet or otherwise. Imagine what life might look like on this other world, right? In many ways, God has designed and shaped human and all life on Earth to really match the conditions of our planet. Well, if other planets are different, maybe they're colder or hotter, they have 2 stars, or the star is more red, in what ways might God have sort of tailored the creatures there to match their environments? That's kind of the question posed to these students. And it was an art contest, so students had to draw and write a brief description of their creature from another planet, which is really fun. I got to be one of the judges. But one of the things I want to just show you here is, as you consider this, right, is again looking at Earth as an example. I think Earth can really teach us a lot as we consider life elsewhere. So let me just show you a few pictures, right? The way that the appearance of creatures here on Earth is reflective of the environment in which they live, right? So here's this picture. I don't know if you can see the creature in this image, right? There's a picture of like a salamander or a gecko or something, some kind of lizard in and among these green leaves, right? It matches the green leaves, right? Because the environment is green, so is the lizard. Here's another example. Can you find the creature? Here on the sand, there's this sand crab that maybe you can see right in the middle, right? So can you find the creature? The stick figure, the little stick walking stick bug. Okay, so in many ways, the life on our planet matches its environment. So if the environment on an extrasolar planet is different, how might that life be different? Right? That's kind of the interesting question to me. Now, we talk about this idea of natural selection, right? And this is like the biological principle that is at work. The basic principle here is relatively simple, which is if a creature lives in like a tan environment, the black mouse is going to stand out and be the one who gets eaten. And if the 2 mice live in a black environment, the tan one stands out and that's going to be the one that gets eaten. So over time, pretty simply, you find that a creature matches the environment it lives in. And so you can see the same sort of thing here. We've got these bunnies, right? Clearly the bunny's going to live. So this was for little kids, so I don't need to keep showing you this. But the whole point here is when we extend this out to extrasolar planets, what are these places like? So it gets our imaginations going about what these creatures, if there were any creatures there, what could they be like? Maybe it's grass, but maybe it's red. Maybe there are lizards, but maybe they are bright white. Or maybe lizards that have fur all over them because it's a cold planet, right? And so these kids came up with these fun drawings and like cool descriptions. I wonder if I've got, here's the finalists. It's just kind of fun to see. These were 4th and 5th graders. Okay, here's a cool one. How about this one? This is the gripe fly. My creature can live in any conditions. It has wings to fly from planet to planet, along the suction cups to crawl up in 0 gravity. All right, just goofy and fun, but it's fun to let our imaginations go. And one of the things I want to show you is a favorite example of this. Oh, in fact, it's right here. This is what I want to show you too. Yes. Okay. So there's a famous artist named Adolf Schaler, And he was commissioned to produce this beautiful artwork of the upper atmosphere of Jupiter, right? So no scientist would really claim that there are living creatures in Jupiter's atmosphere. But the question would be, if there was somehow a living creature that lived in the atmosphere of Jupiter, what might it look like? There's no surface to walk on. It has to fly for its entire life. What would it look like? And so this is a picture that actually illustrates that a little bit. You can see in here a couple examples of two different kinds of life forms that he illustrated: floaters and hunters. And here's kind of a zoomed in view of them. Okay, the floaters here on the left are almost like cloud-like jellyfish that float and move through the atmosphere of Jupiter. And then these hunters, right, are almost like manta rays that fly through this atmosphere and hunt these floaters. Okay, so it's just letting your imagination go as to say, boy, in this kind of environment, the conditions that are there, what kind of life forms could potentially exist? It's kind of cool to think about. All right, and then we get to this tricky question of what do we even mean when we're talking about life, right? I mean, I said grass is life, tree is life, obviously people are life, amoebas are life. And so when we ask about life in the universe, we have to ask well, what do we mean by life? There's a very interesting TED Talk. I'll give you the link to view this if you want to. You don't have to. But he makes, this scientist creates what he calls proto-cells. And these are really just kind of mixtures of oil and water. And I'll show you a quick glimpse of what they look like, because it's it's not going to play. But it's worth checking out. And what's interesting is that these really simple mixtures, which everyone would agree are not alive, they're just oil and water kind of mixtures with color in them, they exhibit behaviors that makes them look like they're alive. Like they move around, they even move towards a food source, they can even sometimes split from one another. And so he's asking some very challenging questions about what does it mean to say something is alive. And those are really uncomfortable questions, I think it's fair to say. And questions that, despite what you might be taught in a biology course, we don't really have answers to. And that's an interesting question.